Have you been enjoying our Impact Podcasts and our great guests? Then please give us a thumbs up and leave a 5-star review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your favorite podcasts. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com. This episode of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Closed Loop Partners. Closed Loop Partners is a leading circular economy investor in the United States with an extensive network of Fortune 500 corporate investors, family offices, institutional investors, industry experts, and impact partners. Closed Loop's platform spans the arc of capital from venture capital to private equity, bridging gaps and fostering synergies to scale the circular economy. To find Closed Loop Partners, please go to www.closedlooppartners.com. Welcome to another edition of the Impact Podcast. I'm John Seager, and I'm so honored and excited to have a wonderful gentleman with us today. He's Tom Seager. He's the associate professor at Arizona State University in sustainability. We're going to talk about that in a second. And he's also the co-founder and the chief science officer of Morozko Forge. Welcome to the Impact Podcast, Tom.
Thank you for having me here, John.
Oh, it's a true honor. And I'm just going to do a little truth in advertising up front. I am a proud owner of a Morozko Forge. It's in my house in Fresno, California. I use it every morning, and literally I've been a healthy person my whole life, but this has even transformed me further and made my journey to wellness the best journey I've ever had ever. And I give a lot of that credit to your great product, the Morozko Forge.
It's great to hear. I'm so glad.
And I'm so glad to have you on, because it's rare when you get to use a product that you're so excited about that you get to meet the co-founder and actually get to have a conversation with him.
I'm right here.
I'm happy you're right here. Before we get talking about everything you're doing at ASU and everything you're doing at Morozko Forge that I'm so excited about, talk a little bit about the Tom Seager story. Where did you grow up and how did you even get on this fascinating journey of sustainability and wellness?
So, John, I hear you're from Queens. You were telling me. And even though you're in California, there's still a little bit of that. Like, we can bring out the little boy from Queens, I can tell. I grew up in Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh, you know, it's different. It's not exactly East Coast. It's kind of the second city. And this is the 70s, because I was born in 1966, and it was a hard decade for Pittsburgh. The only thing that cleaned up the city is they put all the steel mills out of work. So, you know, we had the Steelers, we had the Pirates, but we were still, they used to call Pittsburgh hell with the lid off, you know, because of all the smoke and the pollution. Right. But it wasn't the way that my parents approached it. It was my mom going to, you know, the air pollution board, and she was very active politically. We were recycling, like when I was a little kid, long before recycling was a thing, because my mom in particular had that environmental ethic about her. So when it was time for me to go to school, I knew I wanted to be an engineer. I picked the only program in the Northeast that was civil and environmental engineering. I wanted to go to Clarkson University because they had such a strong environmental program. It was out in the middle of, you know, northern New York. It's a hockey school, the woods all around. I went to Clarkson 3 times. That's where I got my doctorate. And by the time I had advanced to my doctorate, environmental engineering had transformed. It was no longer about the air pollution and the water pollution and the hazardous waste. I mean, you and I would remember Love Canal and some of those like huge environmental controversies. Then it became the ozone hole. The whole trajectory of my career has gotten away from pollution control, which frankly is kind of boring, and it's gotten into sustainability. It's climate change. It's material cycling. It's the closed loop economy, these much more complex and longer term concerns. So that's what I did. As I moved through my career, and I learned more about life cycle assessment, the environment, and sustainability. I met a lot of really creative people, and I got an invitation to a workshop at the National Science Foundation. A friend of mine, Rob Annex, he said, I want to know everything that you can think of when it comes to resilience. I didn't really know resilience, but Rob respected my opinion. We went to this workshop, mind blown. So Katrina happens. That's a sustainability issue, but it's not the kind of, pollution oriented. There's plenty of environmental problems, but the real problem is, how does our infrastructure respond to these disasters and these stressors? Where in our world is the adaptive capacity, whether it's 9/11 or whether it's Katrina or whether it's Hurricane Rita or the wildfires in California? I shifted from what you would call environmental efficiency into adaptive capacity. It's about innovation. It's about creativity. It is about working with the resources that you have to provide the things that people need. This is the essence of civil engineering. It used to be civil engineering was all at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs: shelter, food, clean water, basic things. But as you think about infrastructure, it's moving up Maslow's hierarchy: sense of belonging, sense of a community, self-esteem. All of these things now are infrastructure related. So I'm getting into the Oroville Dam. We did a study. Largest evacuation in California history was ordered because the Oroville Dam was 45 minutes from collapse. This is a huge reservoir, tallest dam in the United States. But it didn't collapse. And it didn't collapse because of the ingenuity of two guys on the top of the dam who were in charge of the emergency generator running the spillway. They lost communication with headquarters. They saw what was going on with the command center there, and they said, I think we got to fire up the generator and we got to open up the spillway. They didn't have any orders to do it. They just took it upon themselves while the command center was relocating and out of communication. Command center comes back online. And of course, they phone up the fire chief who's running the emergency. And they say, well, chief, we got to tell you that, it wasn't your orders, but we did this and this. And the chief said, is that why I'm seeing the level of the reservoir go down? And they go, yeah. Chief says, good job. They didn't have to evacuate anybody after all. This is what I was studying, and it's called resilience. And it was that study that convinced me it is not in the concrete. It's not in the steel. It's not in the highways. It's not in everything that I learned, in my studies at Clarkson. It is in the people. It is in their creativity and in their confidence and in their communication and in their ingenuity, whether it's persevering or bouncing back or thinking through a problem in a different way. When we are under these extraordinary stressors, there are some people who will go into shock and collapse. There are other people where those stressors bring out their most creative, their bravest, and their boldest ideas. Not all of them work, but we have the courage to try them and see what's working and adapt our way through it. That's resilience. To be resilient in our infrastructure, in our society, we must have these resilient people. And so everything for me changed. I stopped, counting up carbon dioxide molecules. I stopped thinking about what is outside the human being and getting into what is inside the human being. What makes us resilient? What makes us creative? What makes us adaptive? And then, the biggest crisis of them all comes along. It's 2020. We're going to shut down the economy. I'm talking to all my friends in academia. Well, the ones I used to have, because I lost quite a few friends in academia. And they're telling me this is the big one. This is the one that we've all been. So I gotta figure this stuff out. Everything that we thought we knew about health is now under question, because I was a skeptic from almost the very beginning, not entirely, but almost the very beginning. I was worried. And AJK, who's on Twitter, you can find her. She said, nope, Tom, I've been looking at data. And I don't think the lockdowns make any sense. I think COVID has been here for months. And so, we got to figure this out. She showed me the data on influenza-like illness reports. We published an article together called The Curve is Already Flat. Of course, it got blacklisted. It got pulled down, censored, but it connected me with people that were thinking the way that I thought. So I got to meet Jay Bhattacharya. I got to meet Martin Kulldorff. I got to meet these people who they have real expertise in public health. They have real medical credentials.
Right.
And for us, it was all about how are we going to get through this disaster. What I've since learned is that we should be questioning everything we thought we knew about health. And here's the one thing: you're in charge of yourself.
That's right.
Like all the other, there's nothing that matters but your N equals 1. You can read the studies, you can get the advice from your doctor, you can adore your doctor and have incredible respect for the hospitals that you're going, and nothing matters but you, because you are not a statistic, you're a person. And so this huge sea change in the way a lot of people are thinking about health is predicated on, I'm in charge of me. I have to make my own decisions. We're all talking to one another. We're all sharing stories and information. And we're not giving up our doctors, but we're thinking more critically about what our doctors are saying, because we're in charge of us. So this is sort of the arc of my life, has gone away from the mathematics and the chemistry and the physics and right into the psychology and the biology of who are we? And, what is our place in this world? Now, I'm still teaching at ASU, of course, but Morozko Forge and the ice baths are one of the tools that people really need. It's taken off because people are finding solutions in their home, in the cold water, that they didn't know they needed. You're such a terrific example where you sort of exhaust the options that are available for you at the hospital. And you say, well, I don't know, I'm going to give this a try. You start getting good results. You talk to other people about it and you say, I'm going to stick with what works.
That's right. How long had you been teaching at ASU when you came up with that aha moment to start applying your engineering expertise towards developing the Morozko Forge?
I think that, as an engineer, I've always been an innovator, but I don't think it would have happened without Jason Stauffer. He was in my classes. He was an undergraduate teaching assistant for me. He's got a very creative, innovative mind. Now, I'd started taking cold showers, and I hated cold showers because they make me angry.
Yeah.
Jason said, the tap water in Phoenix is starting to get warmer. And he said, well, have you ever tried an ice bath? No. He goes, have you ever heard about Wim Hof? No. So, he bought like 200 pounds of ice in a stock tank, and we're doing this thing. And I'm like, this is great. Cold showers are miserable, but put me up to my neck, right? And I'm like, it's almost relaxing, so I love that. The only problem is that in Phoenix, it's 115 degrees in Jason's backyard. In the summertime, you buy 200 pounds of ice and it's melted like 15 minutes later and you feel like you got ripped off or something. Right. So Jason and I were saying, well, we're engineers. We ought to be able to figure this out. And we kind of stumbled into it. It was something we knew we wanted. The dang thing is, John, it's not easy. We're the only ice bath in America that makes ice, because it's easy to sort of go cold. But if you want ice, it's a hard problem. I spent like $20,000 to make one prototype, and it was the ugliest thing. I mean, it's on Instagram. Like, it was really rudimentary. But when we made ice, we invited a bunch of people over. We had a party about it. We all plunged together. We're proud of ourselves. We want to show it off. And one of the guys said, I want to buy it. And right there, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I know how to put things together. I know how to do equations. I don't know how to run a business, but we put something up online on Etsy, of all places.
Wow.
It was, the lady who knits Christmas stockings and our little ice bath, somebody found it and somebody showed it to Ben Greenfield. And Ben said, I've been looking for one of these for years. He put us in his book, Boundless. Like, he didn't even try it. He was put in the book because he heard about it from friends who had tried it. And it was an incredible leap of faith. And the next thing you know, people are saying, I want that too. I want that too. We had to make it a business because we weren't the only ones that wanted it. The world was like pulling it out of us. And we made so many mistakes along the way.
But that's the entrepreneur's journey. What year was that first model put up on Etsy?
Oh, the very first sale we had was January of 2019.
Wow.
I got a little picture. I had it framed for Jason, and I'm like, hey, this is sale number one. We thought we would have a nice little backyard business or something like, I mean, I'm a professor, for goodness sakes. But one of the classes that I teach, and I've taught it for 13 years, engineering business practices. I'm supposed to know some things, finance and depreciation and ethics and stuff like this. I had never really done an entrepreneurship, like a startup gig like this is, and it's been a wild ride and so rewarding. I feel like I can't ever go back.
I don't see it going back. I mean, it's the science is in. This is not anecdotal evidence. This is not voodoo medicine. This is part of wellness 4.0, where, the whole world is going in terms of how do we stay well instead of sick care, which we're living in right now. This is actually healthcare. Part of a good healthcare wellness program includes cold immersion. I mean, when Huberman and Ferris and Rogan and Willick and these people that are inundated with so much stuff, good and bad, all attest to it and actually then give the science behind it and give their own experiences. I think 3 out of those 4 are using it every day or every other day with tremendous results. It's undeniable. This isn't your opinion. This is just fact now, right?
We really stumbled into it back in those early days. Jason's wife, Adrienne, you've seen her interviews. She suffered from Hashimoto's. I forget how many prescription meds she was on. It was more than a dozen. She was metabolically a wreck. Well, she sees Jason and I doing these plunges. She hates the idea, but there we are. She's got to try. Her husband's doing it. Her first ice bath was 8 seconds long. We have it on video. She popped out of there, like Wile E. Coyote shot out of a cannon or something like this. And then she kept doing it. Her Hashimoto's entirely resolved. And this sounds like a miracle because they told her she was going to be on these drugs for the rest of her life. So I had to go to the library. You talk about the science. I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense, and I got to do my Google searching and I'm the science mind and stuff. Well, it turns out Hashimoto's is a thyroid disorder. The thyroid is in constant communication with your brown fat. Your brown fat makes more thyroid hormone than your thyroid does. So thyroid and brown fat, thyroid. Adrienne grew up in Florida. Now she lives in Phoenix and she hated the cold. She's got no brown fat until she started getting into the ice bath. Her brown fat was inactive. When she activated it, recruited new brown fat, that stabilized her thyroid. So I'm getting this out of the journal articles. We do a nice little thing on it. And I'm like, isn't that amazing? Turns out she's not the only one. There's a physician here in Scottsdale, Courtney Hunt. She's posted about the same thing. She suffered from Hashimoto's. She used cold exposure. She did a ketogenic diet. She's completely resolved. Hashimoto's is a reversible disorder as far as the experience of the people who've been doing ice baths. So what is the science? It turns out that your body is evolutionarily designed for the cold. It expects cold water immersion. And if you don't give it what is it it's expecting, no wonder you lapse into a state of disease and dysfunction. There are a few things that your body really needs. It needs sleep. We've been sleeping for 300,000 years as a species, Okay, that makes sense. It needs a healthy diet, periods of feast and periods of fasting, It makes total sense. It needs exercise. It needs exercise and rest. We all accept these things. But what we didn't know is that your body needs cold and warm. So I get a lot of questions about this, even though, you've experienced terrific health benefits after the ice bath. People ask me, no, but my ancestors are from the Caribbean, or my ancestors are from equatorial Africa or something. If you come from a warm climate, do you still need cold exposure? So I had to look into it. You remember where Wim Hof takes his trainees? He takes them up Mount Kilimanjaro, in T-shirts and shorts.
Right.
Where's Mount Kilimanjaro? It's on the equator in East Africa. It turns out there are 4 active glaciers on the equator in East Africa. And if you buy into this theory that Homo sapiens emerged, because the oldest human fossils are in East Africa, that they emerged, in the proximity to these glaciers, then you got to realize that during the Ice Age, our ancient ancestors were squeezed between the glacier and the ocean. Where do you think we got our food? What do you think we were doing all day? We are aquatic species. We walk upright so that we can wade through the water. Our brains are so big because they're fueled by shellfish and the omega-3 fatty acids, the DHA that we get out of the finfish, and all the foraging that we're doing in the water. Somewhere in your ancient history, going back 250,000 years in the middle of some ice age, you have an ancestor who kept himself and his family alive by wading through the water, spearing fish, walking back up, and cooking them around the fire. To replicate that, you got to get into the ice bath. You got to get your red light, or, if you have a wood stove, that's wonderful. You got to recreate the conditions that your body is evolutionarily adapted to expect. And it doesn't matter if you're African or Mexican or Norwegian. We all share these same evolutionary roots, and we don't adapt so fast to new circumstances. Just because we all drive cars and live in air-conditioned buildings now doesn't mean that our bodies are adapted to them. We have to reconnect with the natural seasons and the variability, the sunshine and the darkness, the hot and the cold that our bodies are begging us for, or we lapse into a state of disease.
It's so true. And, sort of like when you see a person and it's love at first sight, I knew the first time I got in that ice bath and I got out of it, that somehow something clicked. And I had no idea about the evolutionary history that you just described so well. And I was only lightly familiar with Wim Hof, but it just clicked in my system. And I said, this is what I got to be doing. I just felt it. And I tell you, it gets better every day, it gets better every week, and I'll tell you, there's really a lot to it. Talk a little bit about the science. Why does Huberman believe it's so good for the brain? And because he's a brain and ophthalmology guy. Why does Rogan, who's a big sports guy, high-intensity sports guy, and Willick, who's another high-intensity mental and physical person, what's going on here in terms of other benefits that people are seeing that you learned about in your journey here now as the co-founder of Morozko Forge? And by the way, if you've just joined us, we've got Tom Seager with us. He's the co-founder and chief science officer at Morozko Forge. To find Tom and his great products, please go to Morozko, MOROZ, KO Forge, FORGE.com, MorozkoForge.com.
John, when we started Morozko Forge, we named it after a metaphor, because we wanted the fairy tale in the story. And we're so stupid. We really should have called it like besticebathforyou.com, or something, 100%. Right? Because anyway, we got attracted to the story. Google buried us. And now it's been years, and we are the #1 search engine return for 4 different misspellings of Morozko. So it doesn't matter. Search for anything that sounds like Morozko. We will come up, and we've earned that spot. So I'm just trying to help your readers out. Tom,
because at the end of the day, what really wins is substance over nonsense.
I hope so.
Substance over form. And you've got the goods. I'm a true testimony to that. as are other people that I know that own your great product. So talk a little bit about...
You were asking me about the science. And okay.
Let's talk about the brain science, the dopamine, and all the other great things that come out of the brown fat, as you were starting to allude to. What are some of the other amazing benefits that come out from a regular ice plunge therapy practice?
The best sales pitch we have is actually getting you in the ice bath. It's not like hyperbaric. You got to do hyperbaric twice a day. You got to do it for 22 days. And, it's really, you get in there, you take a nap and you say, did anything happen? It's not like red light where you know this is good for you. And you're like, is my testosterone going? You get in the ice bath and you know something is happening. And when you get out, you feel euphoria. So I had to look into it. And Huberman he's the neuroscientist compared to me. I'm an engineer, but I had an experience. This was with AJK up in Sedona. And we were so mad at each other. We were dating at the time, and we drove up there separately, and we were having a big, lovers quarrel kind of thing. But she said she would do the photo shoot with me, and we were going to do the forge. And my daughter is the videographer and stuff. So we get in together. And it took like less than a minute because we got the whole video, and we go like this, and then we start goofing around, and then we start smiling, and then we start kissing in the ice bath, and it was like we just fell in love. What is going on? There are a whole myriad of neurochemicals and hormones that are stimulated when you get into the cold. Dopamine is one of them, and dopamine. It's such it's not exactly the lust hormone, but it's that excitement, that reward hormone. In women, cold stimulation boosts their testosterone. They don't even have to exercise. There's only one study, and so this is tentative, but it looks like they don't even have to exercise afterward. Men, we got to exercise. And it makes sense. Our testosterone is produced outside our body, but in women, it's produced in the ovaries, inside their body. And so their bodies respond differently to cold immersion than we do. And what a lot of people don't know is that testosterone is the #1 sex hormone in women. They get their labs and they think they have more estrogen because estrogen is reported in a different unit than testosterone. Right. You do the unit conversion. Healthy women have 3 or 4 times as much testosterone in their blood than they have estrogen. And testosterone is the lust hormone. So we're getting some of this norepinephrine. We're getting this dopamine, and that's the excitement. We're getting the testosterone, and that's the lust. It goes further. It boosts your oxytocin. And as you know, oxytocin is like that bonding hormone. So here's what happened to us we had no choice. We're in there, and for the camera, we're staring in each other's eyes. We're holding hands. We're breathing together. We couldn't have avoided falling in love, because our brains are flooded with these neurotransmitters, and they are the neurotransmitters of joy and attachment and love. We had a great time.
Gabby Reese, in one of her interviews, actually one of her episodes, because she has her own podcast, said, try to have a bad day when you get out of an ice bath. She goes, it's nearly impossible.
She is so right. There's some good science about depression. This is coming out of the United Kingdom. Mike Tipton runs a cold lab. I forget which university. And he has documented case studies in which people with this is clinical depression. They're not responding to medication. They're almost desperate. And he says, have you tried winter swimming? Because, they have these clubs that go into the North Sea or something like that. And these cases, even though he has a lab that he dips people into a bath and he measures all kinds of stuff, they just go down to the beach with their friends in the middle of winter. You can't stay in a bad mood. Your body is incapable of doing it. It has resolved clinical depression in the case studies that he's documented. And you say, well, it's the dopamine hit, but I think it's more. Chris Palmer has a book. He's a Harvard psychiatrist. He has a book called Brain Energy, and it's very clever. His thesis is that your brain, which uses about 20% of the metabolic energy in your body, your brain isn't right if your metabolism isn't right. If you are starving your brain of the energy that it needs because you suffer from a metabolic disorder, it is no wonder that you're in low mood. It is no wonder that you experience cognitive deficits. Chris does not write about cold exposure. That's more like Ben Bickman. You'll see him in his ice barrel and, see him talking about mitochondria. But Chris writes about ketosis and some other metabolic remedies. Cold exposure is great for stimulating ketosis. His theory is you fix your metabolism and it gives your brain the energy that it needs to do the really hard work of managing your mood. Because sometimes, coach might say, shake it off or something. Sometimes you get in this catastrophic thinking and it takes work to say, wait a second, that's not really true. That's not really what's happening. No. There's a future waiting for me over here. I got to apply. I have to remember that I'm doing this, or I'm working on, it's called cognitive reframing. As the bad thoughts sort of take over, we have to activate our brain to reframe them, to change what it means to us and create in our imagination a future to look forward to. Your brain needs energy to do that. So Chris's theory is very powerful because he's seen it play out in his patients. I got to get Chris in the ice bath. We follow each other on Twitter. I don't really know him, and I don't spend a lot of time in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But I think if he experiences this, he'll be like, just like you, Tom, I get it now. It's the number one sales pitch.
As I shared with you before we started taping today, last night I was trying to greatly impress my little 3.5-year-old granddaughter, Paulette, and we were goofing around, and we have a little ritual we do. So I was, of course, trying to Tom Cruise it and went over the wall in front of her house. And this time I was going to fall bad. So I hung on to the wall with my left arm and pulled it out and dislocated my left shoulder. Got that plugged in last night from my nephew, and then went to go see the doc at 6 this morning. But before I came into the office, I just was so excited to get into my Morozko. And I'll tell you, I got in within 30, 40 seconds. I was up to my neck. And I told my son before we started taping today, he said, how was the Morozko this morning? How was the ice plunge? I said, son, I could have stayed in it for an hour. It was just heavenly to be into it, up to my neck. It's such a peaceful experience. It's meditative. And there's so many things. And when you get out of it, you just feel like a new person. Now, I shared with you that I shivered today a lot because I had barely slept last night. And as you and I know, every day you bring to the ice plunge yourself, whatever yourself is at that given moment. So the experience can vary a little bit given the conditions, that the context of your own mental and physical well-being at that time. But I knew I was going to have a tough day to overcome the pain and just make it through. I'll tell you what, I shivered for about 45 minutes or so after I got out, and I've been having one of the best days of the year so far. So, talk a little bit about this, the science behind shivering and the goodness behind shivering.
We're going to, I'll tell you what I learned about shivering. Peter Levine wrote a couple of books. I can't remember whether it's Waking the Tiger or one of his other books, but Peter Levine is a therapist, psychologist who believes in the somatic, the embodiment of your emotions, that your emotions are held in your body, much like Bessel van der Kolk and the body keeps the score.
Body keeps the score, yeah.
Exactly. Levine predates that. But he talks about an experience that he had when he was run over by a car.
Oh.
He's conscious, but he's laid out on the pavement. Some things are broken. He doesn't really know. He's trying to do a mental inventory. An off-duty EMT finds him, comes over. Now, the EMT is taught to immobilize him. And for good reason. You don't know if there's going to be some spinal cord damage or something like that.
Sure.
And Levine remembers saying to him, back off. Because Levine knew that it is not stress that creates post-traumatic stress disorder. It is stress in combination with immobilization. When you experience stress, it activates your fight or flight. When you're able to run or to fight, you release the stress out of your nervous system through that motion. And this is just your body doing everything that it's supposed to do. It might not work out for you. You might get beat up. I don't know, you might get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or something. But the way that our body responds to fight or flight, everything gets all activated. If you immobilize the body, it's kind of like it never forgets. It remembers that stress response, and it can stay on the edge of activation so that something will come trigger to that stress response because it was never resolved. Levine told the EMT, back off, and he began trembling. Now, if you're a hunter like Cam Haines, or if you've ever hit a deer at night with your car, heaven forbid, you've probably seen the animals in the stress. Sometimes it's the last breath they take, but they begin trembling. It is the same effect. Their fight or flight all mammals have this, has been activated. And that trembling releases all of that energy from the nervous system. And Levine wanted it. So he trembles on the pavement. They put him in the ambulance. He's still conscious. And of course, the ambulance nurse is taking his vital signs. And he says, so what's my pulse? She says, well, I'm not really supposed to tell you. And Levine tells a little fib. He's like, well, I'm a doctor. It's okay. You can tell. He's a psychologist, But she tells him, and his pulse is low. Even though he's in this extraordinarily beat up state and a lot of pain, she reports his pulse, reports his blood pressure. He says, oh, thank God, I won't be getting PTSD. Now, that's an anecdote. You go to the journal articles and you realize that people who come out of surgery, especially brain surgery, will often experience what's called post-operative shivering. And they used to believe that it was because a surgical hypothermia sets in. And so they said, oh, we got to keep these patients warm. But they still experienced the post-operative shivering. And it was especially true of children who had broken bones and had to be immobilized during their recovery. The shivering was not for thermogenesis. It was for release of the stress, that trauma that had been building up as a result of the operation, especially brain surgery, and the children who were immobilized because their limbs had to be set. When you shiver, it is like a nervous system reset. So some people ask me, they say, well, Huberman says, do this, or Susanna Solberg says, do this to really, make your body warm up. And all of it makes sense if you're in there to lose weight, or you're in there to recruit brown fat, or you're in there for metabolic reasons. But gosh darn it, John, I went in yesterday. It was a tough day. I started shivering like I was in there 10 seconds. And it wasn't for thermogenesis. It was because I was so bound up in my anxieties. They had to have somewhere to go. So you get back to Jocko, you get back to Rogan. Rogan talks about it. You go to the gym and you work out your issues on the iron, and there's a tradition, and it does. The exercise helps, and everybody self-reports how they feel more relaxed and they have a good day after workout. I work out my anxieties in my Morozko. Sometimes I go in there like, bring that shiver on. I come out, of course, I feel great. I feel like Superman. And then I work out. And this is what Rogan discovered. I mean, cold therapy is as old as Hippocrates. Aristotle wrote about it. And we've been using cold to take inflammation down, like treat injuries for forever. But Rogan had David Goggins on his podcast in December. I remember this really well because I started to get a lot of messages. And the messages were all like, Tom, you're on Rogan. No. I've never been on Rogan. Rogan doesn't want anything to do with me. He's got much more famous people to have on his show. They're like, that's not what I meant. Rogan pulled up one of my Instagram posts and it said, do your cold before your exercise instead of after. So Rogan's kind of he's a creative guy and he likes trying the new things. So he's telling Goggins, that's what I do now. I get up early in the morning in my underwear. I go outside in the winter in Texas. It's like 45 degrees. And I get in the forge. And Goggins is like, there is nothing that will make you question everything about your life. Like the cold water,
True.
Rogan go, yeah, it's really hard. But I read this thing, how it's better for your testosterone. And there's a sense of achievement that comes from it. So that's what he's adopted. The science, it goes really deep. And it is, as I've discovered, it is more than the popular misconceptions. There's some things that we learned from, our high school football coach or something about cold, or our baseball coach, ice your arm or something like that. I'm not saying it's bad, But the further I go into the science of cold exposure, the more I realize that not everything our high school football coach taught us about it was right.
Right. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned women earlier, their testosterone level goes up. If men are exercising and keeping a healthy lifestyle, their testosterone levels go up also with cold exposure on a regular basis, correct?
So this is, it's almost embarrassing, but I think the reason that Rogan found my post is because Liver King got caught. Right. If you're on Instagram, Liver King is very entertaining. And I think if he'd probably said, hey, look, of course I'm on steroids. What do you think? I mean, people probably would have forgiven him because he's got such a great sense of humor and he's a lot of fun to follow. So, but Liver King got caught. And Rogan had Derek more plates, more dates, and they're talking about testosterone and something. They're doing the research. And he said, wait a second. What is this 57-year-old fat guy who teaches engineering at ASU doing with testosterone numbers that are like 1,100 nanograms per deciliter? And this was a total accident. I was healthy as far as my testosterone goes, but I didn't get in there for testosterone. I got like the full, male blood panel. I checked all the boxes and it comes back and it's telling me, my cholesterol and my PSA came back high. And that's not unusual. When you're in your 50s, your prostate specific antigen, often you have, inflammation in your prostate, your mine came back 7. If it's over 4, that's supposed to be cautionary. Right. And I got scared like crazy. I'm like, I know I'm supposed to go to the urologist. I know I'm supposed to have an exam. I know, but he's just going to say, you should have a biopsy. Mark Sisson has a great thread on Twitter about the sepsis that he got from his biopsy that almost killed him. I didn't want any of that stuff. So I said, all right, I'm going to talk to some other guys. I talked to older guys. I talked to guys my age. I talked to younger guys. And there was a series of horror stories about how they treat the prostate that convinced me I got to find another alternative. I said, I'm going to do ice baths. I'm going to double down on that and ketosis. And I'm just going to measure this again, right? I'll give myself a few months. Did that. I brought my PSA down to under 1. Which was enough, right, to like, now I'm relieved. I think like this is I have no inflammation in my prostate. I probably never even had cancer, John, but you know how like your brain starts playing with you. Well,
we catastrophize everything. We catastrophize everything.
It's human nature. Yeah. So I forgive myself. But I was getting my testosterone measured and the lab report comes back and there's like this big red exclamation mark, out of range. You're too high. I'm like, well, that's, I guess I don't mind. But now that I have my PSA under control, I'm going to go to my urologist and I'm going to get like a big pat on the back, right? He's going to say, oh, no, you're fine. Because I still want the, clear conscience. I go in there and he's like, yes, I see. I want more tests. And I'm like, more tests? But I solved this. Like, look at this PSA. And he goes, I just want to check a couple things. Turns out he thought I was juicing. He didn't care about my PSA. He looked at my testosterone. He's about my age. And he's like, there's no freaking way. So he sent me back to the lab to get my luteinizing hormone checked. I didn't know what luteinizing hormone was. Luteinizing hormone stimulates your gonads to make your testosterone. If your luteinizing hormone is low and your testosterone is high, then your doctor knows it's not your gonads making it. You're getting it from somewhere else. So my urologist, he's like, I want one more test. It comes back, big red exclamation mark, my luteinizing hormone off the charts. He knows I'm natural. But here's the thing about doctors. Did he say, so Tom, what are you doing? So Tom, how did you get? He's like, no, okay, you're fine. See you later. Like no curiosity about this. Joe Rogan is more curious about my labs than my own urologist. So testosterone was in the news. Joe starts looking around and he found this thing. You don't need to suffer a testosterone decline with age just because your doctor tells you that's normal. I am not jacked, and I barely work out. And at 1,100, I don't feel abnormal. I just feel like a regular guy. And so what this tells me is, everyone, I'm 57, everyone can be, maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but allow me the exaggeration. You can be healthy too. You don't have to have this age-related decline if you're going to take care of yourself in ways that will boost your testosterone. And the key to that is do your ice bath, then do some exercise. So I get all these questions. How much should I do? How long after and these are all good questions. And the answer is, we don't really know. There's some good studies on, rugby players and coming out of Italy and out of Poland and Finland, places like this. But they're all on healthy young men. They're all on like these 25-year-old guys. So what am I saying? Nobody pays to study 57-year-old men to see, if we can boost their testosterone, I guess. But the reports that I've been getting back from people via social media, there's a guy in Massachusetts, and he says, I used to be on TRT, and I saw your posts, and I quit the TRT, and I said, I'm just going to go down to the pond. I'm going to go swim around in the summertime, and then I'm going to power walk home. That's all he does. It's no weights, no super strenuous stuff. He's older than me. He's up to 1200. And he sent me his labs. It's unbelievable. And so there's a guy in India. He was down around 450. He said, I saw your Instagram post. I said, I'm going to give this try. I never even talked to this guy until he got himself up into the high 700s, sent me his labs. And he said, Professor Seager, I want you to know your thing works. And I'm like, this is fantastic. So this is totally uncontrolled. And every time I post it on Twitter, doctors come from all over the place and they say, there is no randomized double-blind control study that says the thing that happened to you actually happened to you. And I'm like, I don't care. The N equals 1. You're 1, he's 1, and we're up to 13 N equals 1 guys, that have all done this. There's no harm in it. So give it a shot.
Anecdotally speaking, I find that after I do the cold immersion and I go to the gym and lift weights 3 to 4 days a week, my weightlifting session is 20 to 25% stronger, better, more focused, higher quality workout post cold immersion. And it's just a joy to be in the gym doing it. It's not a grind anymore.
There is some great data on this. Andrew Huberman had Craig Heller, who's a colleague at Stanford, a professor on, and it was all about cooling. So Heller's thing is about cooling you off in the middle of your workout. And Heller studied some of his own graduate students. They got a huge boost in peak muscle power output and in endurance. Now, we have some data on ice baths, pre-cooling rather than per-cooling. So cooling before you start your workout. And it's from the ARX headquarters in Austin. They have these great machines that measure everything. It's a really innovative design. Yeah. And so they got an ice bath and people were getting into the Morozko and then getting into their, constant displacement machines and getting data. And I got an email from Mike Polano out of ARX saying, Tom, we're seeing this 25% boost in leg press, 25% boost in shoulder press with the people who pre-cool. And I've got, 6 weeks of these people. And all of a sudden there's this huge jump. What's going on? And I said, well, according to Craig Heller, what's going on is they're getting this big cooling boost in their performance. So I had to go a little deeper. You know that your mitochondria fuel your muscles. The mitochondria convert glucose and fatty acids into ATP, and ATP is used for almost everything in your body. Almost. Wound healing, exercise, growth. ATP is the key to most everything in your body, in particular your strenuous exercise. But mitochondria are damaged by use. They create what's called reactive oxygen species. And it's ordinarily not a problem. But if you overuse the mitochondria, these reactive oxygen species will damage the DNA that the mitochondria, they have their own DNA outside the nucleus, damage the DNA that the mitochondria rely on. And then the mitochondria need a rest so that they can do mitobiogenesis and regenerate and come back stronger. So overworking, overheating, doing too much, not good for your mitochondria, but a little bit stimulates mitochondria. Okay, so what's happening when you exercise? Your mitochondria are working, they become fatigued. Fatigue is your body's way of protecting your mitochondria from damage. Now, if you're David Goggins, you can do 5,000 pull-ups in a minute, in a day, or whatever the record is. He's got this incredible willpower. I don't have it. When I get fatigued, I'm like, God dang it. But keeping your muscles cool reduces the rate of reactive oxygen species generation in the mitochondria, and it postpones that fatigue response. If you're looking to boost your performance, you're getting ready for the big game, you're getting ready for the run, or whatever your sport is, pre-cooling and per-cooling are gonna allow you to get more out of your mitochondria without damaging them. It's no wonder you have a better workout. And what's the best thing for mitobiogenesis, for creating new mitochondria? Cold exposure. So you're doing your mitochondria a favor by cooling them down before you do your workout, and they're repaying the favor by giving you more power and endurance.
Go back to the shivering, Tom. You talked about your shivering getting in, and sometimes I shiver when I'm in the ice plunge, but there's many times when I get out of the Morozko, that's when my shivering kicks in. What's the technical term for when you shiver when you get out, and is that shivering just as good as when you're in?
There are several mechanisms that your body is evolutionarily adapted to defend your core temperature. Shivering is one of them, because that thermogenesis in your muscles is going to generate heat, protect your core temperature from hypothermia. But another one is called vasoconstriction. That's the pain that you feel in your toes and in your fingertips. There's smooth muscle tissue. It goes around your blood vessels, and the smooth muscle tissue will contract, and it will restrict the blood flow into your limbs. So it's going to keep the blood in the core of your body and whatever isn't cold. So one of the weird things about getting in up to your neck is vasoconstriction shuts off the blood flow to your limbs, and it puts more in your head because your head is out of the water. So Joe DeTore at University of South Florida is the one who explained this to me, because he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. And he's a scientist who studies the brain. He didn't even recognize his own student when he woke up in the hospital, and the student, is his attending physician. And he's like, but Professor DeTore, don't you know who I am? He was out of it because his brain was injured. So he said, here's what I wanted to do, Tom. I wanted to get into the ice bath to force the blood up into my head and promote healing. He does a lot of hyperbaric because it's good for the brain. But he's like, I'm going to add cold so I can move all right. So we understand vasoconstriction. But what happens as soon as you get out? Well, your limbs are starting to rewarm. The blood leaves your head. It's leaving your core. It goes back into your limbs. And when it's there, it cools down. Your skin temperature is already down. Your epidermis and the little fat below it, it's already down. And as you kind of inflate your blood vessels in your limbs, the blood gets cold. It has to come back to the heart. It has to come back to the core, and it comes back cold. All of a sudden, your body's like, wait a second. We got to get some shivering going on. The core temperature is dropping. So it's this combination of thermal defense mechanisms, not just the muscle shivering, not just the cold thermogenesis in your brown fat, but what happens after the ice bath, the redistribution of blood in your body, and it's called after drop. I don't know if that's a scientific term. Scott Carney's the first one, who taught me about it. I'm like, so that's what you call that? Because I experience it too. And I've been at this for I'm seriously cold acclimated. And sometime I'll come out, 4 minutes in my Morozko, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm doing great. 20 minutes later, I'm chattering because my blood is redistributing. I'm experiencing after drop. And there's some good science where they take people out of the cold water and they use a rectal thermometer to measure their core temperature, and they keep going down. Sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes it's 40 minutes, even after they come out of the cold.
why when I get in the Morozko or any ice bath immersion, do I get 3 hits? Because I do it. Everyone has their own style. I get in first, and I get acclimated. So I'm 20, 30 seconds in. My breath work becomes great. Then Then the next hit I get is when I put my hands in and my arms in. That's a whole different. Now I'm off to the races, and I try to stay for 7 minutes. At 6:45, I'll flip around and I'll go my whole head in and get a whole different hit. So
yep.
What is there such thing as a best technique as head first and then sit there with your head in, hands out, hands in? What have you learned via science and anecdotal evidence over the years as to, is there a best technique, or is it all good and it's all contextualized to the person?
I can't tell you there's a best technique. I do it all different ways. Sometimes I'll finish with a head dunk. What I never do ever is hold my breath underwater. Okay. So there are worse techniques, but I don't know that there's a best technique. And I never combine hyperventilation like Wim Hof breathing. And Wim will tell you to not do this, but you can find videos where people are doing it. Never combine hyperventilation with cold water immersion. There's something called shallow water blackout. People die. And, I would hate for that. Okay. So what happens when you first get in? There are 2 reflex responses. One is called the gasp reflex. And you feel it. Like, I've tried it. I've put like oil in my mouth to, make sure that I'm not going to open my mouth. And I still get that gasp reflex because I go in at 34 degrees,
Right.
The gasp reflex, all mammals experience it. And it is that activation of the nervous system. I say always go in feet first, never in face first, because there's another reflex, and it's called the dive reflex. And every mammal has that as well. And this is when your face is going in, your pulse will slow down. Your metabolism will slow down. The dive reflex is about preparing your body to go get that lobster or go, I don't know what you're eating today. You're going to go get the sea anemone or, whatever it is going to be on the dinner plate. If you've got to dive, your body wants to prepare you for temporary oxygen deprivation. The problem is that the gasp reflex revs everything up. The dive reflex takes everything down. And Mike Tipton, at this UK university, he talks about, this is hypothetical, but he talks about the possibility of autonomic conflict, where the gasp reflex trying to take you up, dive reflex trying to take you down. And it's possible that your heart gets these mixed signals, skips a beat. It does some things it's not supposed to do. Tipton's worried about it. There's never been a documented case that he's written about or that I've seen. But hypothetically, he says, just keep breathing. Take these things in order rather than going in face first. First thing, gasp reflex. You take control of your breathing. And now you're imagining what that head dunk is going to be like. You're you're telling your body this is what cold feels like. You're bringing everything down. We have some good brainwave data on this. Your brain will involuntarily go into a deeper meditative state. And I suck at meditation, but you put me in the forge and I'm like, whether I want to or not. Right. So those are the first 2 stages. Gasp first, dive reflex second. And then you say, and then I put my hands and feet in and I don't know what's going on. Everything changed. Well, of course it changes. That's the vasoconstriction. These are the most vulnerable parts of your body. You put your whole body in and it has taken the blood and it said, okay, this part is warm. We can store blood. And as soon as you put it in, your body's like, John, what are you doing? I put a lot of blood in there and now I got to get it out. So you're shocking your vasculature. And it's no wonder that you experience sort of another stage of adaptive response. And then the head dunk, I just keep exhaling while you're doing it. I had a really good experience. I did 7 minutes this morning. And part of it was, I kind of want to get ready for this podcast, early this afternoon. Yeah. And I did a head dunk and I was in one of my most relaxed states. I don't think I've ever really been more than 11 seconds underwater, but I'm just breathing slow. Usually I feel abject panic anytime like the water, I could be 3 years old and afraid I'm drowning, even though I got like a life preserver on and a snorkel and my mom is holding me. But you know that feeling sometimes when we get as kids, when we're learning to swim, and that usually happens to me when I do it. And today I was like, this is great. I could stay in here. I had wonderful experience. I try not to put the cold on the top of my head. And this is back from the cold shower days. If I cold shower on my chest, everything like clavicles down, I'm okay. But as soon as I let the cold on the top of my head, I'm miserable and wretched. And so just because it gives me bad memories, I go in, but I try and keep my head up. I breathe out and I come out. That final stage that did not happen for me today, but typically happens, is that panic stage. And then I come up and I feel like I've cheated death. You know, I'm alive. I'm grateful to be alive. Sometimes I stay in a little longer. Sometimes I'm like, all right, I'm going to get out. I'm going to get my steel mace. You know, I'm going to get my bells or kettlebells or my barbell or something like that. And I feel like Superman.
That's awesome. That's awesome. For our listeners and viewers who just joined us, we've got Tom Seager. He's the co-founder and chief science officer of Morozko Forge. To find Tom and his colleagues and check out the Morozko Forge options that you have, please go to www.morozko, M-O-R-O-Z-K-O Forge.com. Forge is F-O-R-G-E, MorozkoForge.com. Tom, brown fat. Brown fat. Everybody doesn't want to be fat. Why is brown fat good fat? And what benefits does building up our brown fat during using regular cold immersion practice do for us?
Babies are born with brown fat. They don't have a lot of muscle. So for thermogenesis, all they have is brown fat. And you never have more brown fat at any time in your life when you're born. Babies are really good at defending their own body temperature if they get cold by activating their brown fat. As parents, we're bundling our babies up and we're putting we're like, oh, it's 65 degrees, you know, we're putting them in the car seat. You got a granddaughter, you know, and when I was a dad of young children, I got to admit, I was a little paranoid about it being cold. If I had to do it over again, I'd be like, what the hell? You know, they got plenty of brown, they're fine. And when you think about when you were a kid, you're going outside. You remember all those winter storms we had in like 1977, and it was snowing like crazy. And school, it seemed like was canceled for a week. And you're going to go out and you're going to go sledding and stuff. And you can hear your mom's voice. She said, oh, put on a jacket. And you're like, Mom, I'm not cold.
Right.
Kids know when they're cold. They know when to come in. They're going to ask mom for the hot cocoa or whatever. The point is that they have way more brown fat than grownups do. And it used to be that physicians thought everybody grows out of it, that adults just don't have any brown fat. Well, this is late 70s. A new screening technique for cancer. There's an imaging technique called PET. It's invented. And by the 80s, they start installing it everywhere. PET works by scanning the body and tracking glucose. So they inject you with a little like radioisotope glucose. It's a tracer, and they can notice it with the PET, and they know that cancer cells live off of glucose. So they will take up the glucose out of your bloodstream, and that will create an image on the PET scan that allows the doctors to identify the tumor. And yet they started seeing these inexplicable symmetrical, like tumors are not symmetrical, but they started seeing these spots on the PET scans that they had no idea what they were, but they were symmetrical, and they only saw it in the cold examination rooms. Because the PET machine, it uses a lot of power, it generates a lot of heat. These rooms have to be air conditioned. Sometimes they're just too cold. So people go in there, and it took like some Swedish researcher, like years of like, who knows what these spots are? What are these scans? What's showing up? This Swedish researcher goes, hang on, I think that's brown fat. And he ran an experiment, and he said, we're going to do this in the cold exam room. We're going to do it in the warm exam room. Like, hey, look at this. I just found brown fat. And that set off a cascade of like new research using PET scans, thermal tomography. It's now infrared. You can detect brown fat. Susanna Solberg's work is all based upon PET scannings, and we now have brown fat scientists, and it's all been in the last 10 to 12 years that we're saying, oh my gosh, this brown fat is amazing. Brown fat is an essential organ. It is not like a nice to have. If you don't have brown fat, then there is something in your metabolism that isn't right. And I'm going to tell you why. We think brown fat is for thermogenesis, and it is. But it is also a secretory organ. That is, it makes hormones like thyroid hormones. It makes neurotransmitters. It makes something called FGF21, fibroblast growth factor 21, which is a neuroprotective hormone. Brown fat protects your body against the cold in a multitude of ways, not just by producing heat. And if you don't get cold, you do lose all your brown fat. Fortunately, we can get it back. Brown fat is also the number one way for improving your insulin sensitivity. All right, so what do I mean by that? This is coming straight out of Ben Bickman's book, Why We Get Sick, which is a terrific book, because you get in there and you realize that every single leading cause of death in the United States from chronic illness is associated with insulin resistance. Insulin sensitivity is the opposite of insulin resistance. And people with more brown fat have more insulin sensitivity. It means they're metabolically more healthy. They age slower, and they are less susceptible to some of the chronic diseases that are usually associated with aging, like Alzheimer's, like cancer, like rheumatoid arthritis, like all these things that we used to think, well, you know, I'm just getting old. I guess that's the way it is at my age. It doesn't have to be like that. It's probably a gradual degradation of the metabolism that is causing what you think of as the diseases of aging. When you get yourself cold, you recruit brown fat. And the principal difference between brown and white is white has very few mitochondria in it. Brown fat is packed with thousands of mitochondria, and they're there for really good reasons. So you're going to recruit brown fat. You're going to make new mitochondria. You are going to reverse. Let me be careful before the FDA shows up at my door. When you take care of your mitochondria, you take care of your metabolism. When you take care of your metabolism, you slow the rate, the progression of all of the, and the risks of all these chronic diseases associated with aging. So, John, you can tell what I want to say is you reverse your age. And that, you know, and people are going to they're going to comment on here and they say, that's not possible. But the fact is, Patrick Porter at BrainTap, he will measure your energetic age. This is not DNA methylation. This is not telomere length. He's measuring like the electromagnetic field that your body creates. He puts these electrodes on me. He does like the EEG. I'm not really sure what it is. And he says, well, congratulations, Tom. You're 32 years old. When you take care of your metabolism, you slow the rate at which you age. An energetic age, which is what he's measuring, that is younger, means your metabolism are more vital and your mitochondria are healthier. So that's what I really mean to say, is that at an older age, you can feel more energy, you can feel more vital, you can recapture that brown fat condition that you didn't have since you were like in your late teens.
Unbelievable. And most of our, and by what did you say, when by the time we get to 40, most of us have basically, it's out, it's gone.
Yeah, they took all the old PET scans from the like Sloan Kettering Institute, you know, these cancer institutes. They got all these records of these PET scans and they went through them all. After the Swedes were like, hey, there's brown fat on there. People were like, what, there is? And they went back and they said, 95% of the people on those scans had zero brown fat. And it's because they're not cold. You know, think about it. You live in New York and you bundle up, you go from the subway, you spend like 2 seconds, you know, in between the cab and the building. Arizona, you say, well, Arizona gets so much sunshine, you know, people must have like great vitamin D. No, they don't. Because we live indoors. It's so damn hot outside in Arizona that nobody goes out when the sun is out, and we wind up with vitamin D deficiency. The point is that our sheltered comfortable lives are disconnecting us from the environment. And I kind of get it. When my mom, when my parents, they were born in the Depression. When they grew up, they moved to Pittsburgh, and you don't want to breathe that air. You don't want to be in connection with the environment. The water is filthy. The air is disgusting. The environment was so polluted when my parents grew up that their ethic was, you stay inside. It's cleaner in here. But by the time I got to be a young man, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, like outside is where we belong, John. And if we don't get enough of that outside, we get sick. So not that I ever argue with my dad about it, because he grew up at a different time. To his generation, the smokestack meant there were jobs. My parents are environmental ethic, but if you grew up in the Depression and you grew up in World War II, there were certain compromises that people were willing to make. I'm not willing to make them. I want to get myself out into the woods, get myself out into the sunshine. I want the cleanest water I can get. I want to get into the ocean, and I want that to be clean too. People aren't getting enough cold because they are protecting themselves from an environment that they belong in. So who were the 5% of the people who had brown fat? Lumberjacks, traffic cops, garbage collection men from Finland, and stuff. These people who are outdoors all the time. And you might think, well, that's not good. The guy on the garbage truck or the lumberjack, he's breathing all those fumes and stuff. No, he's healthier than you because he's in an environment that is giving him a healthy amount of stress, and his body is responding in this like hormetic adaptive way to keep him strong. Now, because these were all cancer patients, it's not indicative of like the whole population. But since then, people have been looking for brown fat all over the place. That was the whole basis of Susanna Solberg's study. And she wasn't looking at sick people. She was looking at winter swimmers, people who are on purpose jumping in the fjords of Denmark, to try and keep themselves cold. What she discovered was most of these people who get an average of 11 minutes a day, a week, plenty of brown fat. Didn't really matter how they broke it up. It only takes 10, 11 minutes a week in the ice bath or the cold plunge or the ocean or whatever to keep yourself. It doesn't take a lot.
So Huberman has quoted that study, Soderbergh's study, and it is.
He loves that study.
Yeah, he loves it. And that's the mantra. Like you just said, you don't need to be doing this 30 minutes a day or 23 minutes a day. This is not a competition. You get 11 minutes a week. You've hit the bare minimum to get the maximum benefit.
It might actually be less than 11. I mean, we don't really know. She did a survey. She asked the study participants, well, how often do you winter swim? How long do you stay in there? And people gave all different kinds of answers. She averaged it out and said, hey, on average, these people with brown fat are doing 11 minutes a week. It might be less. We don't know because nobody has systematically investigated the minimum effective dose.
Tom, I know they've talked about it publicly, so I don't feel bad bringing it up, but I mean, Rogan has a Morozko forge in his house.
Yeah.
Ben Greenfield has one at his house.
Yeah.
These are people that, again, they're inundated with all sorts of nonsensical, opportunistic wellness tools, ideas, vitamins, God knows what. And they've chosen your product. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, it's arguable to say that Rogan, in his own way, and even Ben Greenfield, the advent and rise of podcasts, and especially the bleeding podcasts, has created a whole different democratization of information than you and I grew up with. You and I grew up with CBS, NBC, ABC, three great iconic channels, PBS, and a local. And that was pretty much what we had. Eventually, that spread out to some cable opportunities, wonderful brands like HBO, CNN, et cetera, et cetera. But arguably, Rogan is as powerful, if not more powerful, and has more credibility than many of these wonderful brands that we all grew up with because of the trust breach that's happened in the last 4 or 5 years.
Well said.
So talk a little bit about, I want actionable items in terms of action steps now going forward?
Well, hang on. There's a caveat. I mean, you gave a long list of famous people, and it's true. Rogan being and Greenfield sort of being the most salient example, but not everybody uses a Morozko. Rogan was teasing Huberman about it. He says he's got one, but he won't get in it because it's too cold. You know, when you talk about guys like Rogan and Greenfield, they're the extremists. They're the ones. I mean, didn't Greenfield like put electrodes on his nuts or something and inject stem cells into his penis? Like, they do crazy stuff, right?
Yeah. But remember what Jobs said. It's the crazy ones that we all call crazy until we call them geniuses.
Jobs had a good point.
He had a good point. You know, they're out on the cutting edge for a reason. And they're open to trying things. And they're open to, and they then eventually they want the best though. They want the best. And Huberman has another one. He's talked about it, and good for him. I mean, you can't argue. He's a brilliant guy, and with he brings so much clarity to difficult subject matters. It's just wonderful, as my son says.
Huberman is doing for podcasts what Carl Sagan did for science in the 19th century. You remember that day where we're in like elementary school and they wheel in the big TV and we're all like, it's going to be movie day, you know? And then we watched Carl Sagan teach us about cosmology or the physics or something like that. Well, you know, Carl Sagan's passed on. It's Huberman doing the social media thing that is now communicating the real science to the public in a way that they're so hungry for. And none of them are in elementary school. Like you and I still want that experience. And I really admire what he's doing. Of course, I wish I could get him in the cold. I want him in a Morozko.
But he's made science, as you just said, he's made science fun and now ubiquitous because the rise of his podcast has been breathtaking. He's one of the top 5 in the world now, I think. Let's go to, for our viewers.
You were asking for actionable items, right?
So when they're when they start, like I did, a compare and contrast, which I spoke with you about off the air, talk a little bit about what our listeners and viewers who now are maybe interested in trying and getting into this practice. There's a lot of ice baths out there now. It's become a big business. You were early. You were very early. Talk about what they should be looking for when they buy an ice bath, and why is the Morozko Forge different than most of your competitors?
Well, I was saying that Joe and Ben Greenfield are the extremes.
Yeah.
But Ben actually doesn't plunge that cold. He knows that you don't have to be 34 degrees. Like, I like it. Joe likes it. And on Instagram, having the ice floating in there, it's great for Joe. But Ben won't go that cold. There is something else that is wicked important to Ben, and it is electrical grounding. We designed the Forge so that the tub is grounded, the electrical system is grounded, and the water is grounded. And when Ben got his Forge, the first thing he's doing is he's testing the electrical grounding. So he has Brian Hoyer from Shielded Healing come out, and Brian is the expert. He's testing all the EMF, and he puts his electrode in the water, and he says, Ben, the Forge is 20 times more effective for grounding your body than walking in the barefoot grass. Now, grounding is huge, and none of the ice plunge, cold, whatever the hell they are, companies are going to talk about grounding, because when you get one of those beautiful, sleek acrylic tubs, you can't ground it. When you get a plastic molded and you hook it up to a chiller and stuff, the water's not grounded. Now, you can get other benefits. You can get the temperature, you can activate the metabolism, but Greenfield is ahead of his time. Grounding reduces your blood viscosity. And it does. I mean, I learned about this in grad school. There's something called zeta potential, and it's an electric field around your red blood cells. When the zeta potential is off, your red blood cells will aggregate. They will form little clumps. If those little clumps aggregate, you get a clot. When you discharge the static buildup in your body, and the Forge is fantastic for this, you discharge it, the viscosity of your blood goes down, clotting goes down, and risk of heart attack, stroke, deep vein thrombosis goes down. Greenfield was looking for grounding. He didn't necessarily need the coldest one, but we were the only one at the time. So that's what he got. What do you look for? Temperature. how cold do you want it? And does the equipment that you're looking at, get that cold? Grounding. Is it electrically grounded for your safety? And is the water grounded for your health? And then the third one is water quality. I got my doctorate in environmental engineering, and I spent 6 months in my kitchen working out the filtration system for the forge. Most of the ozone generators that are on the market, they don't work at all. I'm buying all these ozone generators off of Amazon, and I'm getting them from China, and they're all built for hot tubs. And most of them are cosmetic, because at the temperature of a hot tub, the ozone breaks down so fast, it doesn't really do you any good. The Chinese know that it doesn't really do anything, but make you feel good about your hot tub or something like that. There were 2 companies that actually produced the ozone that we needed, and we went with the best one at the time. So when you read about ozone, and there's some articles out there, oh, it doesn't really work. It's true. You need to have cold, and you need to have the right ozone component. We're an ice bath. We got the best ozone generator that I could find. It works great. You need to know how to use the equipment to measure oxidative reduction potential in order to design this stuff right. Most people don't. I'm not saying it's hard, but I learned it in grad school. I got my Nernst equations and everything that I need. So our ozone system keeps the water disinfected. If the equipment manufacturer that you're considering says, and you only need to add chlorine, every week or something like that, and you only need to change the water every 3 days, right? If it's because their filtration disinfection system just doesn't work. And a lot of them don't work because they're buying parts from China, installing them in accordance with the manufacturer's instruction, assuming that they work without doing the testing. So I should wrap up. I'm a crappy salesman, John, but this is my best pitch, right?
This is really good stuff.
Good. It's temperature, grounding, and water quality. Those are the 3 big things. And everybody else gets the right. Do you like the looks? Is it the right size?
Let's go back to something you said about an hour ago. Ice. Yours makes ice.
So the only one. At the time we made it, it was the only one in the world. There are 2 other companies. There's one in the United Kingdom. They're friends of mine. They called us up. They said, hey, we want to make ice. Would you mind helping us out? And we thought, here's kind of a strategic competitive situation. So we got on the phone. They got a great sense of humor. They're really clever. So we shipped them a unit. And we said, yeah, take it apart. You guys are really smart, and you can probably think of things that we should be doing. And they gave us a bullet point, like 36 points. We think you should fix these things. And so we did. And they make ice. They're called Brass Monkey, which is really fun. We got Rogan on our podcast. They got Russell Brand on theirs. And I haven't sold an ice bath in the United Kingdom since they went into business. But it's good to have friends in business. The other one is down in Australia, and it's Odin. And this guy, you can tell, I've seen one of his units. He has labored over it. It's the same thing that we did. He invented everything from scratch. He makes, he's got some other problems that I shouldn't bring up, but man, I kind of want to have the ice bath making. I wish I could have a beer with these guys and we could just talk about, you remember when there were no companies that made ice, and now there's 3 companies that made it. And isn't that cool? It's a lot easier to just buy a chiller unit, plug it into a tub, and you can get down to 40 degrees or so and you're fine. But that doesn't work for me. If I don't look down at the water and see the ice, I don't get scared. I don't get that anticipatory anxiety, is what Viktor Frankl called it, And then when I go in, I want to feel the ice moving around. I want it, on my shoulders. I want to hear it clinking up against, because that's how I got started. And that's the experience that I wanted to have when me and Jason invented it.
So now we have, it's become clear, Tom, not only are you passionate as an entrepreneur about what you do, but because also you bring your civil engineering legacy to the table. You've truly designed and built the only full American-made machine, ice bath machine. Best of breed, and God forbid a part breaks, because things happen, things break in this world. it's easy to access a replacement part, comparatively speaking. When I spoke to some of your competitors, when I was looking to on my own to buy a Morozko or an ice bath plunge machine, yours was the only one that the parts are right here, and if something goes down, it's quick to fix. And
it's because they're all made 2 miles from my apartment.
Yeah,
in Phoenix, Arizona. And that's something that, we really got to redesign that website. We say made in the USA, and that's true. And I'm going to change it. It's made in Phoenix. There are people, real people in a real community, and there's a city here. And, the USA is huge, but it's made right there. Because we invented it in the backyard. We grew too big. And so I rented a warehouse, and I get up and I drive 2 miles down the road and I see the 36 guys that work for me now. It used to be me and Jason, with the saws and the sanding and stuff. We've put people to work when COVID was at its most scary and the bars were all shut. And the bartenders came to us and they said, "What am I going to do?" And I said, "Can you sand?" And they said, "I think I can figure it out." And I said, "Well, can you paint?" They said, "I think I can figure it out." I said, "Can you solder?" And they said, "No, I'll teach you." And we put these people to work. And then the economy blew up. We had to give everybody raises. They're In-N-Out Burgers paying $22 an hour, right? So I got to pay my guys more than that. And they're still here because they've been here since 2019, So there's something happening here that I don't ever want to let go of.
They're part of something that's bigger than themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about the future. You're 4 years into this. You're at the right time in the right place, and you're the right person. You are an engineer. You've got the education cred and the street cred. You live it. You not only talk the talk, but you walk the walk. I see your Morozko out on your balcony of your condo there.
It's right.
There. It's right there. It makes me happy just looking at it. So talk a little bit about your dreams as you go to bed at night or wake up in the morning. What do you really think? What's your dream for Morozko Forge?
It
you're
gets a little personal.
You're young. Look at
Thank you.
Buffett's 93. He's still the best investor in the world, and he's 93. Charlie Munger's partner's 100, or he's going to be 100 next year. Yeah, these guys are still the best at what they do. In the whole spectrum of things, we're still young. What are you going to do? What's the goals here with Morozko Forge?
This is tough because I'm a teacher. My father was a teacher. It's in my blood. I used to kid around with AJ. I'm like, look, I could go bankrupt doing Morozko Forge. I'll be living in a van down by the river, but I am going to have a whiteboard, and I'm going to I feel like I was born to teach, but something happened at COVID. The universities, they kicked me out of the classroom. We had to teach on Zoom. It was really frustrating. And I was vocal on social media to the point where there were complaints sent into ASU about things that I had posted, not related to my teaching, but related to COVID. And in particular, the response. I was anti-lockdown, never in favor of the vaccine, was very critical of our policy responses. And it got me in a lot of trouble. NPR did a hit piece on me. I was in the San Francisco Chronicle and the Newest World's Report. I mean, just everybody, it seemed, for 1 week. Andy Warhol talks about 15 seconds of fame. I had like my 15 minutes of being the most vilified lockdown professor in America, and it put me at odds with my administration. So I have these annual performance reviews, and I'm meeting with my department chair, and he's really like, "Tom, what are you doing? Why aren't you writing proposals and getting research money out of the National Science Foundation and the NIH? You're really good at this. And you could do this. We could promote you to full professor. If you just, if you say, oh, I was wrong, and, I'm going to get back to doing all the stuff that everybody says I should be doing, we could put you up for promotion." John, it's never going to happen. I will be a lifetime associate professor. Maybe Huberman will be too. I don't know. We'll be associates together or something like that, because I am not going to do the things that the university says I have to do. Here's what I told my department chair. There was no such thing as environmental engineering, I said, until Dr. John Snow invented it. There was a cholera epidemic in London, and you know this story as well as I do. And John Snow put up a map. He called it the ghost map because he put a pin in the map of London where everybody died of cholera. And all the pins collected around this one well. And John said, take the handle off the well. And people stopped dying because the well was contaminated with cholera. It was the water that was killing people. And as a result, in the city of London, they said, oh, we better go upstream on the Thames. We'll draw the water out before people, poop in it. And then we'll treat it. And then we'll pump it into the city. The doctors save lives one person at a time. Environmental engineers save lives millions of people at a time by providing clean water, clean air, good infrastructure. And my department chair is listening to this. And I go, I'm going old school because it's no longer these infectious diseases like cholera. It's no longer hazardous waste. It's no longer, dirty air that is killing people. What is killing people is metabolism. What is killing people is chronic illness. We have a mental health crisis in this country, and it's related to metabolism and our disconnection from the environment. I'm staying an environmental engineer. It is my duty to create the infrastructure and the technologies that people need to stay healthy, just like it has always been. It's just that the challenges are different. And, he kind of wrote that down. He said, are you going to write a national science proposal? How are you going to turn that into a proposal to get more money out of the federal government? I'm not. I'm teaching my classes and I'm feeling really good about that. But you can tell I'm at this juncture in my career where I got to decide, is my mission going to be what I'm trained to do? Write more journal articles. I've been cited 8,000 times, and I'm successful as a faculty member. And I'm starting to think, John, I don't care. I'd rather lead my department in podcasts than in journal articles at this point. I'm watching Huberman closely because I think he is reinventing what it means to be a scientist with like a professional sense of obligation to the public. And I want to do it like that.
But you know what I call that? That's servant science. Yeah. You can be a servant scientist. And that's a greater calling, because I think it's wonderful to affect and impress these young brains that you're working with, these young folks at ASU. But we're talking about your opportunity is the world now, with the right marketing and growth of your company, which is unlimited. The blue sky on your kind of company, with science is there. This is not anyone's opinion, yours nor mine. This is science backed. I agree. The opportunity is as much as you want it to be with Morozko Forge. And Tom, I want you to keep coming on this show, sharing more stories, science, anecdotes, just storytelling, because storytelling is the most powerful way of persuasion. And I want you to know that this is a great place for you to come, a safe place for you to come to continue to share the Morozko Forge story. I'm unbelievably grateful to you and your partners. I wish you continued great health and success. For our listeners and viewers, to find Tom or to buy or compare and contrast the Morozko Forge versus the other ice baths that are out there, please go to www.morozko, M-O-R-O-Z-K-O, Morozko Forge, Forge.com. You can find Tom there, and you can find his great products there. Tom, not only am I grateful for all the time you spent with us today and all the wisdom you share with our listeners and viewers, but I do thank you for making the world a better place.
It's a pleasure to hang out with you, John. I'd love to come out and, get to know you better. This has been great. It's terrific being here.
This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Engage. Engage is a digital booking platform revolutionizing the talent booking industry. With thousands of athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and business leaders, Engage is the go-to spot for booking talent, for speeches, custom experiences, live streams, and much more. For more information on Engage or to book talent today, visit letsengage.com. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States, and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com.